Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of J.S. Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we have a very interesting chorale. We're looking at Christlag and Todesbanden, which is a text setting we've seen in the past, but this harmonization is particularly interesting. It translates to Christlay and Death's bonds. We're just going to hop right into the analysis. I anticipate this video can get very long if I get too ranty, so we're just going to hop right into it. 1 sharp in the key signature, E minor to start things off, E major to end things. I would usually reckon we're in the key of E minor, but I think we start things off in the key of B minor, considering all the C sharps and A sharps throughout the phrase. And this E minor chord is actually our 4 chord. We have a passing 7th in the tenor as well, before we get F sharp, C sharp, F sharp, and A natural. This is a minor 5 chord, F sharp minor, and this is more so a byproduct of the fact that the melody does not contain a leading tone. And usually the context in which minor 5s occur are because of this, because Bach doesn't change the general I don't think he changes the general tonality of the melodies. He usually leaves them intact. Sometimes he adds ornamentation, but I could be wrong about that. But we do have a minor 5 here. It's not being used really in a cadential context. It's being used in the middle of a phrase, which is generally the context in which they're seen. And they usually, they're stable chords. They can kind of go anywhere. Regardless, we have a passing 7th in the bass before we get D, D, F sharp, and B, which is B minor in first inversion. That's 1/6. And then we have 4 voices moving off the harmonic rhythm, and 3 of them are passing tones. This A sharp looks like a passing tone, but it's not. We're skipping up into it and moving in the same direction. But the chord that is a result is C sharp, E, A sharp, and C sharp, which is A sharp diminished in first inversion. That's 7/6, and we would expect a tonic triad and root position afterwards, which is what we get: B natural, F sharp, B, and D, which is our tonic triad and root position. 1/6-7/6-1, or the inverse 1/7-6-1/6 is a very common progression in Bach's music, or his chorales more specifically. We then have A sharp, F sharp, C sharp, and E, which is F sharp 7 over A sharp. That is 5/6-5. And that goes where we would expect B minor, B, F sharp, B, and D, which is another tonic triad root position. And as we're closing in on our perfect authentic cadence, we have F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp. That's another 5 chord, F sharp major, passing 7th in the tenor. And then we have an interesting cadence. We have B, D sharp, F sharp, and B, which is a major tonic chord. We have that Picardy third, and you might be able to guess what this B major chord is doing here. Typically when we have Picardy thirds, they're at the end of the chorale, like one we have here in minor keys, but when we have them in the middle of the chorale, typically what happens is the tonic is being recontextualized as the dominant in the key that we're going to move to, and that's exactly what Bach is doing here. Immediately after this B major chord, we have D sharp, B, F sharp, and B, so he just reiterates the chord and rotates it. This is B major in first inversion, so we'll just change the figured bass, but this B is turning into the 5 in the key of E minor as we are preparing for a phrase in the key of E minor. It ends in a perfect authentic cadence, but this B major chord is our dominant. We then have E, B, E, and G. That is our tonic triad and root position, E minor. F sharp, A, D, and A. This is a subtonic 7th chord. That's 7/6, or D major over F sharp. We'll see this progression used a couple times throughout the chorale. Some people analyze this as 5/6 of 3 as well, depending on whether or not you feel like the subtonic 7th doesn't really have as much of a place in the progression as the leading tone does. I think it's kind of redundant, but that's the way that I actually originally learned it, and I've since changed my opinion about it. Regardless, in this case it does go to 3. We have G, G, D, and B, which is G major in root position. 7 wants to go to 3 regardless, so I don't really see the point now, but that's the way that I learned it. We have a passing tone in the tenor before we get E, B, E, and A. But this A is an accented non-chord tone, kind of like a 4/3 suspension. This G is our actual chord tone, which is our tonic. 3 going to 1 is kind of an interesting progression. It's static. 2 stable chords moving from one to the next. Nothing really new gets contributed to the texture. We would expect like a dominant, or maybe even 2 chords between 3 and 1, but sometimes we get it, and it's fascinating when it happens. We then have A, C, E, and F sharp. That's F sharp minor 7 flat 5 in first inversion, or 2-6-5. We know that Bach loves 2-6-5 chords. We then have B, B, D sharp, and F sharp, which is B major in root position. That's our 5 chord like we learned earlier. Passing 7th in the tenor, and then we cadence on E minor, E, G, B, and E, which is our tonic triad in root position. Okay, looking ahead, we have an imperfect authentic cadence in the key of G major, and where we modulate, I think, is pretty much up to you. I don't think we modulate any later than the beginning of the next system, which is where I think we modulate, because that's just where it sounds like it modulates to me. But because there's no chromaticism happening anywhere here, that tells us where E minor is separate from G major. I think it's a big zone. You can pretty much say you modulate wherever, but I'm going to analyze until the cadence that we're still in the key of E minor, because the analysis looks a little bit cleaner on the page, I believe. We have E, G, B, and E. That's an E minor triad in root position. No need to reanalyze. Passing 7th in the bass, we then have C, G, E, and G. That's C major in root position, which is a 6 chord, our submediant. Neighbor tone in the alto, passing 7th in the bass before we get A, C, E, and A. That's A minor in root position, which is 4-6. We have another passing tone in the bass here before we get C, A, C, and E. That's A minor in first inversion, which is just taking our A minor triad and inverting it. No need to rewrite the Roman numeral. Then we have another passing tone in the bass before we get E, G, B, and G, which is E minor in root position. Typically when we have a 4-6 chord going to a tonic triad, we're always connecting the 6, which is in the bass of the 4-6 chord, to our tonic. I don't think I've ever seen a time where we have 4-6 going to 1 where there isn't a connecting tone between the two chords. Just an interesting observation that's been very consistent across all of the chorales so far, and we've looked at quite a few. But I think this E minor chord is the last stop on the modulation zone. I'm going to say we're moving to the key of G major here, and this E minor chord is now our 6. We then have F sharp, D, D, and A, which is D major in first inversion. And then we have G major, G, B, D, and B, which is our tonic triad in root position. E minor, D major over F sharp, G major. And we're seeing that progression yet again. And I think we're going to see it even one more time later in the chorale, if I'm not mistaken. Alright, moving ahead, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B minor, but I think we go to B minor via E minor, which is kind of interesting. We have G, B, D, and B, which is another G major chord, no need to reanalyze. We then have E, B, G, and E, which is E minor in root position, or a 6 chord, and I think this is also our tonic in the key of E minor before we briefly move to the key of E minor, which will then take us to B minor. We have F sharp, A, and D sharp, kind of making us feel like we're in the key of E minor in this case. This is D sharp diminished over F sharp, or 7-6. And then we have E minor in first inversion, G, B, G, and E, which is kind of like a variation on this progression here, 1-7-6-3. It'd be kind of like the equivalent of, well, actually I've seen this progression before in the key of B minor, just in the opposite direction. But this is G, B, G, and E, which is E minor in first inversion, and coincidentally, our chord that's going to move us to the key of B minor, E minor, is now our subdominant, or 4-6. We then have 4-6 going to 1, D, B, B, and F sharp, which is B minor in first inversion. Now notice we have 4-6 going to 1 here, but this is a 4-6 chord, not going just to 1, but to 1-6, and we don't have a connecting tone between the two of them. It's different from when we have 4-6 going to 1 in the case where we have the 1 chord in root position and there's only a step in between the two bass notes. But in this case, there isn't that same consistency. Bach approaches the 1 chord by leap or by step in whatever direction. It doesn't have that same pattern. We have a passing tone in the bass here before we get F sharp, B, and D, which is B minor in second inversion, and as we're closing in on a cadence, it's a chord that we could expect, a tonic triad in second inversion. No need to rewrite the Roman numeral. We then have F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp, which is F sharp major in root position. That's a 5 chord. 164 going to 5 is sometimes notated with the bracket or analyzed with the bracket to show that they are related to one another. I don't think it's super necessary, but some people do it. It's kind of a habit. It's a habit for me from school, so I'll often write it in there just because when I see it, it just identifies the two together, but it's not super necessary. And then we cadence on B minor, B, D, F sharp, and B, which is our tonic triad in root position. Similarly, we have a phrase that ends, interestingly, in the key of A minor, so we're moving even further away from, what am I trying to say here? We're going to the key of A minor, which is distant from the key of B minor, but we're doing so again through an intermediary key. Instead of E minor, we're going to G major, which will then take us to A minor. So we're going steps along the circle of fifths to get us to the key. Bach does foreign key modulations from time to time because, you know, chords that are two away still share at least one common chord. But in this case, the transition is smoothed out via a key that bridges the gap between the two distant keys. So in this case, we start in the key of B minor, and our trajectory is A minor, but G is the conduit that sort of bridges the gap. We start off with E, B, G, and B. That's E minor in root position, or a 4 chord in the key of B minor. It also happens to be 6 in the key of G major, and we have a passing tone in the melody. The C sharp really makes it feel like G major. We have F sharp, A, and D, which is D major in first inversion. That's 5, 6. Starting to see a pattern here. We've seen this progression before in the past. E minor, D major in first inversion going to G major. We've seen it twice. This is the third and final time we've seen it. We have G, G, B, and B, which is implying G major here, but it's a fascinating spelling where we have 2 roots and 2 thirds rather than, you know, a root, a third, and a fifth, and like a wild card. We then have B, G, G, and D. That's G major in first inversion, so we could just change the figured bass there. And then we have a passing tone in the bass as well, bringing us to D major, D, F sharp, A, and A, which is our 5 chord in root position. And then we get a bit of a deceptive progression. We're going to talk about this cadence when we get to it because it's very fascinating. It almost is like we're in the key of D major here, or at least that's what it sounds like until we get this A minor triad preceded by this G sharp in the bass. A minor really sneaks up on us here. But this 5 chord here, you could say that the modulation happens as early as this 5 chord, but I think it happens right before the cadence because it sounds like it's coming out of nowhere. This G sharp is the only thing that makes me feel like A minor is warranted or feels like it's something that would be approached at all, because the chords preceding it really feel like G major or even D major. But after this D major chord, we get E minor, E, G, E, and G. Similar to how we had this 2 root 2/3 spelling, we get another one here, and that is a 6 chord in the key of G major. We then have F sharp, A, D, and F sharp. We're getting this idea of E minor going to D major in first inversion again, which is 5, 6. But I do think that this is our common chord. And in the key of A minor, this is a 4, 6 chord with a passing leading tone in the bass. So this is just like it feels kind of like an authentic cadence because of the leading tone in the bass. So I'll put A, C there, but I do think this is, I guess, technically not a perfect authentic. You know what? I'm going to make the argument that it is an authentic cadence, but you could make the argument that it is a plagal cadence as well because it is 4, 6 going to 1, but the leading tone in the bass really does make it feel like this, there is dominance going on here, even though there's not another chord to support it. Regardless, the G sharp here does play that dominant role, I feel, and then we cadence on A minor, A, C, and E, which is interesting. Very interesting cadence, very fascinating cadence. And this A minor ends up just being repurposed as the 4 chord in the key of E minor. And we get ready to move to a perfect authentic cadence in the key of E minor. So after this A minor chord, we have D sharp, F sharp, F sharp, and B, which is B major over D sharp. That's 5, 6. We have a 7 introduced here, which would be taking the chord and turning it into like 7, 6, 5, because we have, or actually, you know what? Yeah, no, I'm gonna make the argument that this would be like taking the chord and turning it into 7, because we have the B going on here, B, F sharp, and A. Oh, well, actually, it is kind of like what's happening here. I'll put it in parentheses. It's kind of like taking the chord and putting it in root position, but you kind of have to aggregate everything that's happening over these 2 beats, right? The D sharp, the B, the F sharps, and the A. But they're never all occurring at the same time. There's always there's something in the bass is undermining all of them occurring at the same time. But regardless, we have some type of 5 chord moving to E minor, E, G, E, and G. Another one of these 2 root 2/3 spellings, but still a tonic triad nonetheless. This E is a chord tone, so we don't need to mark it. However, this A is not a chord tone. We then have B, B, D sharp, and F, which is a 5 chord and root position, passing 7th on the tenor. And then we cadence on E major, E, G sharp, B, and E, which Bach often does in minor chorales. He ends with a Picardy third. I feel like because it's like the last movement, and he wants to end on a more uplifting note. And I believe this is the last movement of this particular cantata. It's a shorter one. But that concludes today's analysis. A very fascinating one. I'm still not 100% sure what's going on here. It's a very unusual cadence. Whether or not it's a perfect, a plagal cadence or an imperfect authentic cadence, I'm inclined to believe that it's an authentic cadence because that leading tone movement in the bass, and it's very interesting when you have an authentic cadence or something sounds authentic because the leading tone itself, just one tone, can really sway the effect that a cadence can have on you, because without the leading tone there, it would have been a plagal cadence. But in the same way that we have a 4/6 chord going to a 1 here, he always links the 4/6 chord and the 1 when it's ascending with that leading tone, or with some type of 7th. In some cases, like we saw here, 4/6 with the natural 7th going to 1, it's not always a leading tone, but in many cases it is. So whether you hear it as a plagal, I keep on calling it a perfect cadence because I see PC, but a plagal cadence, or whether you consider it as an authentic cadence like I do, I think both analyses are arguable and valid, and really just depend on the way that you hear it. But ultimately it is a wonky cadence and one that is worth talking about. But on that note, if you are interested in following me along on this journey to analyze all of the chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Also feel free to hit the notification icon so you are notified of when my daily video goes live. If you want daily dose of Bach or your daily fix of analysis, or both, this is the right place to be, and I'd be happy to have you along on the journey. But on that note, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for supporting the channel by doing so. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.